There she is. She's pretty. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Jamison, and this is how I cook. I'm going to show you guys how to prepare an amazing show-stopping brisket for your 4th of July cookout, Memorial Day cookout, whenever you find yourself gathering around. Up next on This Is How I Cook, the secrets to my smoked brisket. Okay guys, before we get too far into this video and into the ingredients, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. It really does help my growing channel. So the star of the show, behind all these spices and seasonings, is our USDA Prime brisket. This brisket I bought from Costco and it was about $29. You might can't get one this price now because the price of everything's gone up, but at the time I bought it and put it into the freezer just for this video. For our seasonings, we've got good old-fashioned salt, we've got some celery salt, we've got black pepper, onion powder, we've got garlic powder, and we've also got our good old friend Mr. Accent, aka MSG. So before we season our brisket, we need to trim this brisket and remove not only this marking from the slaughterhouse, but we need to remove all this hard, tough fat and make sure that we have a nice, even fat cap on top of the brisket. So the first thing I'm gonna show you how to do is come here and tackle this. There's two parts to a brisket. This part over here, the flat side, guess what they call that? They call that the flat. This side over here that looks like the point or a pointy end of the brisket, they call that the point. And so your brisket is actually two muscles that sort of join together. And when you slice the brisket, you'll see a seam of fat in between those muscles. So what we want to do is simply have a nice uniform amount of fat on the brisket and remove all this hard fat on the edge, because that won't render down when we cook it low and slow as we barbecue. So I come in with a sharp knife. I use my boning knife. And all I'm doing is looking for, the hard fat on my brisket. And right here on the back side of the brisket, that's where the hard fat is at. We're gonna remove that on this particular brisket. Also pay attention to which direction the grain of your muscle on the flat runs. Because what we're gonna do when we slice the brisket is we're gonna come across the grain when we cut it after we take it out of the smoker. So let's take this fat off here. Everybody trims their brisket in a number of different ways. I was listening to one of the guys that I follow his barbecue advice, and he was saying that he doesn't even trim his brisket because he has a restaurant to run and he can't afford to cut all those trimmings off and just waste them. And see, once you remove that first piece, you see how hard that fat is? That's not gonna render, that'll be unpleasant to eat. So we take all these trimmings and we set them to the side. Let me do it from this angle so you guys have a little bit better view. You just take your time, find that seam, and you just lift it up. Out here on the edge, it's hard too, so what we're gonna do is just take our knife and come in gently. Find that seam once again. We're gonna remove this fat. And as you can see, I've got a nice channel in here that I've created now by removing that hard fat. That wouldn't have cooked down in the smoker. And so now what I'm gonna do is take my time and just start whittling off this other fat. One of the tips to trimming any piece of meat is you want to do it while it's really cold, because it makes the fat easier to remove and carve out. Once again, every brisket's a little different, so you have to find the fat on your brisket and trim it off as you think you need to, but I'm showing you the main pieces to take off. You want to get all that hard stuff off. And in this case here, we've got a little bit of this kind of membrane going on. We want to trim that off too. There's another piece of hard fat in here as well. So what we're gonna do is, now that we've exposed that out, just come in here gently and kind of run along the line of it. There we go. Until we can get it exposed. And then we just come in and trim, 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 trim. One of the nice things about trimming out the fat is that it creates nice areas for you to season and to get your seasoning deeper into the brisket. Those little folds and crevices, you season those. Those are nice little flavor surprises for your people who get a chance to taste your delicious brisket. Okay, for our purposes, the brisket has been trimmed. I removed all that hard fat, cleaned up the top. This is all gonna look prettier when it comes out the smoker because this is gonna become uniform and it's gonna contract. But this is our trimmed brisket. Okay, we have trimmed our brisket and we've given it a rinse under cold water and patted it dry. The next step that we need to do before tomorrow is season our brisket. Don't be scared to apply seasoning in generous amounts to your brisket. It is a large piece of meat, and when you cut it, the interiors of the slices will not have any seasoning on it. So the only seasoning a person is gonna get when they take a bite of that brisket is gonna be from the outside, the bark of the brisket. So apply your seasonings generously, follow my example, and I'm sure your brisket's gonna turn out amazing. I'm using Kosher Salt, and all I'm gonna do is grab a good pinch and just begin to apply it to the brisket. Next thing we want to apply is our black pepper. And then you just start rubbing your brisket to make sure you don't have any splotchiness with your black pepper and your salt. Our next ingredient is we're going to come in with some celery salt. Because we've already put down a generous amount of salt, the celery salt is just an accentuating seasoning. We don't want to put down a bunch of this on here. So just a little bit to add that sort of, oh, what is that flavor into the brisket.
All right, so the next ingredient we need to add to our brisket preparation is garlic powder. And so I'm going to start by applying a generous dusting of garlic powder. Remember, we're just trying to complement flavors that go with beef. So garlic is a great flavor to go with beef. Here I'm going to add some onion powder. I love the flavor of onions with beef, and so I'm going to use that on my brisket as well. I want a little bit of caramelization on my brisket. So one of the things that I like to apply is some light brown sugar. So here I'm applying a generous handful of light brown sugar to give the brisket a little bit of sweetness and to help develop the bark on the outside of the brisket. It's going to give the brisket a nice color, and it's going to add a little bit of sweetness to help accentuate the flavor of the beef. Now that we've added our base seasonings, we want to come in and finish up the brisket by adding some accent, aka MSG. This is going to be a flavor enhancer to help make all the other flavors that we've added pop. So, once you've seasoned the other side of your brisket, the final step is to store your brisket within the refrigerator overnight. To do this, I use a large plastic unscented trash bag. The reason I use an unscented trash bag should be fairly obvious. I don't want my brisket to be contaminated by the chemicals and the perfumes that are in some trash bags. So if you're going to do this, you want to use a plain unscented trash bag that's made of plastic. And the way I do this is I lay the trash bag on top of the brisket, and then I simply invert the trash bag by grabbing the brisket through the inside of the trash bag, and that closes up the trash bag onto the brisket, and it does it in a nice clean way without messing up the opening of the trash bag or getting the seasoning from the brisket onto the outside of the trash bag.
So this is the next day. I've got a thermometer probe that I'm going to put into the thickest part of the brisket. And so that's going to be my point up here where the burnt ends are going to come from. So I'll take the probe and I'm just going to insert it into the thickest part, as deep as I can get it into the brisket. I want it into the middle of the brisket, as deep as I can go. So I've got a second probe that I'm going to use to monitor the flat part of the brisket's temperature during the cook, because these are going to cook at about the same rate, but not exactly the same rate. So I don't want to take it out too soon when the flat is at the desired temperature, but then the point's not there. So the point is going to be really what drives the cook, but I still want to make sure that I know where my flat is at during the cook as well. And so the thermometer I have allows me to have multiple probes. So on this brisket, I don't want to come to the thinnest part. I'm going to come into the middle part of the flat, right into the side, and I'm going to do the same thing I did with the point and insert this probe as deep into the center of the brisket as I can. I want to show you guys how I have this brisket inside of my pellet smoker. I've got my pellet smoker set to the smoke setting, which will put out a lot of smoke onto the brisket. It's been in here for 2 hours, and so I'm going to show you what the brisket looks like at this point in the cook. So the point side of the brisket is facing the pellet box, and the flat side of the brisket is facing the drip port. This brisket is fat side up, because as the fat melts, I want it to baste the brisket. When we finish the brisket by wrapping it in butcher paper, we're going to turn that fat side down and let the brisket cook on that side and protect the bottom side that's going to have a nice bark on it. But this is my brisket setup. If you use a conventional grill, like a charcoal grill or a wood burner, then place it towards the hotter side in terms of the point. Place that point towards the hotter side of the grill, and the flat towards the cooler side of your grill. But that's how I've got my brisket set up. We're going to turn this up to 275 and cook this at that temperature for the remainder of the cook. So our next step and our last step before we take it off the grill is that we're going to wrap this brisket in butcher paper. And so what I want to do is I'm going to take a toothpick and put it into the top of the brisket, because I want to make sure that I remember which side is the fat cap side, because I want that side down when I put it back onto the smoker. And that's our wrapped brisket. We're going to take this brisket and cook it until it reaches an internal temperature of 208 degrees, and then we're going to rest it inside of a cooler. Okay, here is our brisket. So the first thing we want to do is make a slice here to see how tender it turned out. Take my carving knife here and slide through the middle. Break this open so y'all can see that smoke ring. Oh boy. Look at that smoke ring. Look at that brisket, y'all. Look at that brisket. All right. So we got the flat and we got the point. And so what I like to do here is flip this over so I can see the grain of the meat. The grain is running this way. So what we'll do is just take our time here and slice through. See how it bends? Here's the test. Pulls apart. Got me a piece of that flat. Comes apart. Some nice smoke ring. Oh, here we go. Oh. Simply delicious. Hold on, I gotta get another bite so I can tell you guys if this was an accident or not. Oh man. Okay. That brisket is simply amazing. I'll be honest, it's not as tender as I would have liked it to have been. Each brisket's a little different. And so what you're dealing with there could have been the cut of meat, the quality of the meat. That was a USDA prime brisket. I've had my best success cooking briskets and getting them super tender when I've cooked actually choice briskets. So, but everything else I've shown you on that brisket, the taste, the flavor profile, the smoke, it is an amazing brisket. And even though it still has a little bit of a tug to it, it's still delicious and it's really good. And I've showed you the basic steps of how to make a brisket. So guys, I appreciate you watching my video. Thank you again for stopping by my channel. Be sure to share with somebody this video on how I made a brisket. And I hope you try this for yourself. I've got to go and get back to this brisket, and I've actually got to go drop some of this brisket off to my neighbor. So I might have a surprise for you guys later in a minute where I actually get him to taste it and let you guys know what he thinks. Guys, thank you again. I'm Jamison, and this is how I cook. And that was my brisket. Take care. So guys, yeah, man. So guys, this is my neighbor, Al, and he always is the one who receives.
I'm the lucky one.
So we're gonna get Al to do a little bit of a taste test here for us live.
Look at this. Smoke rings, everything.
That was a piece I was hoping you'd pick up too.
Yeah, James.
It's good?
It's good, brother.
All right, man.
Oh my God.